The first sliver of dawn painted the Kenyan savannah in muted golds and deepening blues as Johari Kamau pushed open the creaking door of his mud-walled hut. The cool morning air, usually a balm, turned instantly to ice in his lungs. He froze, one foot poised over the dusty threshold, his breath catching in his throat. What greeted him was an impossible, terrifying tableau. 53 lions. Not 2, not 10, but a staggering 53 powerful beasts. They formed a silent, menacing semicircle around his compound, their amber eyes glinting in the burgeoning light. They weren't just watching him. Their intense, unblinking gazes carried a chilling sense of purpose. They were waiting. At the heart of the formidable pride, centered directly before his hut, lay Quito, the magnificent male lion he had treated just days ago. Quito, with his immense frame and a mane the color of burnt umber, lifted his massive head, his intelligent eyes locking onto Johari's. A low rumble emanated from his chest, a sound that wasn't a threat, but something deeper, an unidentifiable resonance that vibrated through the earth and into Johari's bones. His mind screamed with every protocol, every instinct ingrained from years of working in wildlife conservation. Retreat, do not engage, call KWS. This was an unprecedented display of lion behavior. But a deeper, almost primal conviction pulled him forward, defying logic. He remembered the precise, almost surgical nature of Quito's wound, a deep puncture that he'd initially attributed to a buffalo horn, but which now, in hindsight, felt wrong. There had been an unusual, almost chemical odor about it, faint but distinct, and an aggressive discoloration around the edges that stubbornly resisted standard antiseptic treatments. It had been more than just infection. It was something foreign, unsettling. The conflict raged within him, a silent, agonizing battle. To call the Kenya Wildlife Service meant delay, sedation, and a strong possibility that Quito, already weakened, might not survive the stress. To step into that circle, to defy every rule of engagement, was an act of madness, a gamble with his own life. But Quito was suffering. A personal oath, forged in the heat of his previous intervention, bound him to this creature. My grandfather's words echoed, "The gift awakens." But what gift could save me from this? He whispered to himself. The ancient Kikuyu wisdom feeling distant and abstract in the face of such raw, immediate danger. Yet, a flicker of ancestral courage ignited. Quito needed him. Slowly, deliberately, Johari lowered himself into a crouch, his eyes never leaving Quito's. His hand reached for the worn leather of his medical bag, a lifeline of salves and instruments. As he moved, a collective tension rippled through the pride. Their massive bodies shifted, muscles coiling. "I need to check your wound, friend," he murmured, his voice a low, soothing current against the growing roar of his own heartbeat. Quito made a pained effort to rise, but a deep, guttural growl from the dominant male lion, a behemoth with battle scars etched into his face, held him down. It was a silent command, absolute and chillingly intelligent. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Johari straightened. Every movement was measured, broadcast, a surrender to their presence as he stepped forward, closing the impossible distance to Quito. The dust crunched under his boots, each step sounding like a drumbeat in the profound silence. Then, something extraordinary happened. The pride shifted again. Not a sudden, aggressive lunge, but a deliberate, almost choreographed rearrangement. Cubs were gently nudged aside, adolescents repositioned. They formed a narrow, living corridor, an unspoken invitation, a path directly to the injured king. It felt organized, intelligent, a collective will at play. Johari knelt beside Quito, utterly vulnerable, surrounded by the predatory might of the pride. He forced himself to focus, to battle the primal, instinctual fear that threatened to overwhelm him. His gaze fell upon Quito's flank. The wound, though healing, still bore that faint, disturbing discoloration, a reddish-black stain that seemed embedded in the fur, refusing to fade. It was more than infection. It was an anomaly. He worked methodically, his hands steady despite the tremor in his soul, cleaning the wound, applying a thick layer of his grandfather's potent herbal poultice, and then carefully bandaging it. Quito remained utterly still, his massive frame unmoving, his intelligent eyes now closed as if in profound relief. Johari remained kneeling beside Quito, his hands still hovering over the fresh bandage. The air was thick with the scent of wild earth and lion, a scent that for the first time felt less threatening and more accepting. The dominant male, the scarred patriarch who had silenced Quito earlier, approached, his massive head held low. He stopped mere inches from Jahari's face, his breath warm and heavy. For a terrifying second, Jahari held his own breath, expecting the worst. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the giant lowered himself, settling into a sphinx-like posture, his amber eyes fixed on Jahari. It was a silent, profound gesture of approval. Slowly, the rest of the pride followed suit. One by one they settled, creating concentric circles around Quito and Jahari, a living, breathing fortress. An unspoken agreement had been forged, an extraordinary trust extended. For the next 3 hours, Jahari moved within their circle, checking Quito, offering him water from a canteen, even placing strips of dried meat near his muzzle. The lions watched, their vigilance unwavering but without aggression. The entire scene was utterly surreal, a dream woven into the fabric of the harsh savannah reality. As the sun climbed to its zenith, casting harsh, short shadows, Jahari knew he had to retreat. He rose slowly, making no sudden moves, and began his careful withdrawal to his hut. The pride watched him go, their powerful forms unmoving, their gaze following his every step. They did not follow. Inside the quiet solitude of his hut, the adrenaline that had sustained him for hours finally crashed. His hands trembled as he poured water into a tin cup, his body shaking with a mix of exhaustion and the lingering shock of the impossible encounter. Through the small shuttered window, he could still see their silhouettes, their silent vigil unwavering against the harsh midday light. That night, as the air grew cool and the sounds of the night hunters began, Quito's fever finally broke. Jahari, peeking through the window, saw the injured lion stir, a good sign. The wound, even from a distance, seemed to be healing at an astonishing rate. Yet the strange, reddish-black discoloration around it remained, a puzzling stain that defied any logical explanation. By the flickering lamplight, casting dramatic shadows across the rough mud walls, Jahari opened Mzee Omari's leather-bound journals. He traced the faded script, searching for answers, for anything that could explain the day's miracle. An entry from decades ago caught his eye. The lions came again today. This makes the 4th generation I have treated. They remember. Jahari paused, a chill tracing his spine. It wasn't just individuals, but entire prides. They knew who could help them. They choose to trust. His gaze fell on a marginal note, scribbled in a hurried, almost frantic hand. The encroaching shadow, the poison seeping into the earth, the silent hunters with metal teeth. He'd dismissed it before as poetic, perhaps even superstitious, ramblings from a man whose understanding of the world was steeped in ancient folklore. But now, it resonated with a new, unsettling clarity. He closed his eyes, re-examining Quito's wound in his mind's eye, illuminated by the ghostly lamplight of memory. The deep puncture, yes, the unusually aggressive infection, certainly, but the edges, they were perfectly circular, almost cauterized, impossibly precise for an animal injury. And that persistent, unnatural discoloration, that faint, almost chemical odor he'd detected. It didn't look like a buffalo horn. It didn't look like any natural injury he'd ever seen. He wondered if his grandfather's gift wasn't merely the ability to heal, but also an innate awareness, a sensitivity to unnatural threats, to things that defied the natural order. What kind of silent hunter leaves wounds like this? He whispered to the empty hut. What kind of poison stains flesh and fur? A growing disquiet settled in his gut, a cold knot of dread. Quito's injury wasn't an accident, it couldn't be. A soft, resonating roar echoed from the pride outside, followed by answering calls that rippled across the savannah. It was a stark reminder of the wild world, its fierce beauty, and the fragile, profound trust he now held. But with that trust came a chilling premonition. This extraordinary connection had ushered him into a profound, hidden danger. The dawn of the 3rd day brought with it a profound shift. Quito, once a felled king, was visibly stronger. He stood, tentative but firm, his immense frame catching the golden light, a testament to an unprecedented recovery. The wound on his flank, though still a raw patch, was healing at an astonishing rate, the edges knitting together with remarkable speed. As Jahari stepped out of his hut, The strange, surreal scene continued. The pride remained a living, breathing encirclement around his home, but now their posture was one of relaxed vigilance, a quiet guardianship. It was then that Mzee Kipchoge arrived, his wizened face etched with the stories of generations, accompanied by a small group of other Maasai elders. They kept a respectful distance, their gazes sweeping over the lounging lions with an ancient understanding. "It is as your grandfather said," Mzee Kipchoge rumbled, his voice like dry leaves in the wind. "The animals know the healer's blood. They remember." Johari walked out to meet them, acutely aware of the bizarre tableau he was now a part of. Lions, in their natural ferocity, should not be lounging peacefully around a human compound, patiently waiting for a man. This was a fragile, sacred trust. Mzee Kipchoge brought news that sent a cold wave through Johari, a film crew from Nairobi, and conservation officials. They are on their way. Johari's heart sank. This felt sacred, private, not for the world to sensationalize, he recounted later, the words heavy with resignation. A deep moral conflict flared within him to protect this unique, fragile pact with the lions, to preserve the sanctity of their trust, or to allow scientific documentation and media exposure that could, in an instant, shatter everything. He knew instinctively that the true, unnatural nature of Keto's wound was a secret that could not be revealed to the wrong people. He turned to Mzee Kipchoge, his voice hushed. "How long will they stay?" The elder's eyes, deep and knowing, met his. "Until their brothers healed, Johari, or until outsiders disrupt the trust." The words hung in the air, a stark warning. Johari spent the day caught between worlds. He attended to Keto, gently cleaning the wound, marveling at its rapid progress, even as that stubborn discoloration remained. Simultaneously, he tried desperately to contact officials, hoping to establish boundaries to ensure the lion's protection from the inevitable curiosity and intrusion. By afternoon, the savannah began to buzz with activity. A perimeter was established a quarter-mile away from his compound, rangers working to hold back onlookers, a growing media presence, and their intrusive lenses. Then, a sleek KWS vehicle pulled up to the perimeter, and out stepped Dr. Zawadi Adongo, head of Kenya Wildlife Service's veterinary department. Johari braced himself for skepticism, for the inevitable scientific dismissal of what he knew was extraordinary. But Dr. Adongo surprised him. Her gaze was sharp, her demeanor serious. "I knew your grandfather, Johari. Mzee Omari's results were undeniable. I've followed similar cases across the reserve for years." She revealed that there were hidden reports, whispers of similar incidents, animal healings, unusual trust, cases never officially acknowledged, swept under the rug of conventional science. "What you have here is extraordinary, Johari. A level of trust and intelligence that contradicts conventional understanding. I've seen enough to know something is happening." This validation, unexpected as it was, gave Johari a surge of hope. He led her to Keto, pointing out the strange discoloration, the unnaturally precise, almost cauterized edges he was now convinced were not natural. Dr. Adongo observed it, her brow furrowing, but then almost too quickly, she attributed it to secondary infection, perhaps an unusual plant toxin the lion had encountered, or an obscure dermatological reaction. Johari felt a subtle dismissal, a deliberate redirection away from the deeper anomaly of the wound itself, a careful avoidance of the truly unsettling questions. A research team dispatched by Dr. Adongo began setting up their equipment, cameras whirring, sensors deploying. Johari felt a growing unease. The focus was solely on behavior and healing, on the spectacle of a man accepted by a pride of lions. No one seemed interested in the source of the injury, the chilling implications of a wound that defied natural explanation. The sun beat down on the savannah as Dr. Zawadi Adongo, Johari, and Mzee Kipchoge stood beneath the shade of an acacia discussing Keto's remarkable recovery. Dr. Adongo flipped through her notes, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Your grandfather Mzee Omari documented 3 generations of this pride. He had an unparalleled connection." Johari, though grateful for her belief, still grappled with the personal implications. "But how do they know me? I've only been here 3 years. Mzee Kipchoge smiled, a network of wrinkles deepening around his ancient eyes. "The savannah has its own memory, Johari, and lions remember longer than men." His words were a reminder of a deeper, more ancient wisdom that Johari was only just beginning to grasp. The tranquility was shattered by the arrival of a sleek government vehicle. From it emerged Minister Nima Adongo, Kenya's Deputy Minister of Tourism and Wildlife. Her presence instantly escalated the significance of the event from a local anomaly to a matter of national, even international importance. Minister Adongo, poised and elegant in her formal safari suit, offered Johari effusive praise for his heroic actions, but her attention quickly pivoted to concerns about safety protocols and managing the swelling international media attention. Johari felt a tightening in his chest. This sacred trust was becoming a political commodity. He pushed past his growing unease. Minister, perhaps a private, restricted research zone would be best, to protect the pride's natural behavior and to ensure Keto's full recovery without undue stress. Minister Adongo considered this, her gaze too sharp, too assessing. A reasonable compromise, Mr. Kamau, she conceded, a hint of something unreadable in her tone. From then on, the media was kept at a distance, fed controlled footage and carefully worded statements that emphasized professionalism and public safety, all while meticulously avoiding any specific mention of the unusual nature of Keto's wound. Yet, despite the efforts to create a sense of order, Johari couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Members of the research team, ostensibly there to observe the lions, seemed to be observing him more intently, their cameras subtly pointed in his direction. It felt like surveillance. As afternoon mellowed, Johari approached Keto for what he hoped would be the final treatment. Keto was fully standing now, his head held high, meeting Johari's eyes with a new purpose, a silent understanding passing between them. The dominant male and several females rose with him, not to block, but to form a shifting corridor, guiding Keto and Johari towards the open savannah. As Johari knelt, his fingers brushing Keto's fur near the almost healed wound, he felt it, a faint, sticky, metallic residue, almost imperceptible against the coarse fur. His heart dropped, a cold certainty solidifying in his gut. This was it. He subtly scraped a tiny dark fleck from Keto's fur, palming it, ensuring no one saw. This confirmed his darkest suspicion. This was no natural injury or infection. This isn't about research, Johari realized, his gaze drifting to where Dr. Adongo and Minister Adongo stood, engaged in a low-voiced conversation. It's about containment. What are they trying to cover up? Keto, sensing Johari's discovery, leaned forward, his massive head touching Johari's shoulder in a gesture of profound, silent gratitude. But in that contact, Johari also felt what he now interpreted as a desperate plea, a stark warning. The pride began to move, a powerful, flowing river of muscle and tawny fur, heading towards the distant horizon of the savannah. Keto paused at the edge of the human-imposed perimeter, turning his head to look back at Johari, a powerful, unspoken message passing between them. A shared secret, a trust deeper than words. Johari knew then, with absolute certainty, that the gift his grandfather spoke of now carried a heavy burden, to uncover the truth behind Keto's unnatural wound, and whatever dark conspiracy it hinted at. This is where the real hunt begins, my friends, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If you're as gripped as I am by Johari's incredible journey and the chilling secrets he's about to uncover, then you know you won't want to miss what happens next. Make sure to hit that like button, share this story with everyone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to stay tuned for the heart-stopping conclusion, because what Johari finds, it's far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The pride, a tawny river of muscle and instinct, flowed silently into the vastness of the savannah, leaving Johari alone. The dust settled, but the silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with a profound sense of purpose for him, and a chilling, dangerous secret. Clutched tightly in his palm was the tiny metallic fleck he had scraped from Keto's fur, a damning piece of evidence that weighed more than its physical size suggested. Later, the research team debriefed in his hut, their scientific data confirming Keto's astonishingly rapid healing. Dr. Adongo, her professional curiosity piqued, expressed a keen interest in Mzee Omari's traditional formulations. Johari, ever the pragmatist, agreed to share his grandfather's wisdom, but only on the condition that any findings would exclusively benefit conservation efforts and the local communities. Minister Adongo, with a practiced smile, lauded the idea of a dedicated traditional medicine research center, hinting at state funding and support. But Johari couldn't shake the feeling that this offer of collaboration was a veiled attempt to control his research, to steer him away from the source of the injuries, not just the healing. Under the cloak of night, with only the soft glow of a battery-powered lamp, Johari secretly set up his basic field microscope and chemical kit. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he prepared the fleck. The results, when they came, sent a jolt of ice through his veins. It was a synthetic biomarker, a complex man-made pollutant utterly unnatural to the pristine savannah. His stomach lurched. This was irrefutable proof. Mzee Kipchoge visited again, his timing uncanny. He spoke in riddles, yet his words resonated with new meaning. There is a hidden blight, Johari, that sickens the land and its creatures. The animals, they seek a healer, yes, but they also show us where the illness lies. Johari finally understood. Keto's gratitude, his sustained presence, wasn't just about healing. It was a desperate warning, a primal form of communication about a human-caused danger. He returned to Mzee Omari's journals, now desperate for clarity. He found cryptic notes, scrawled in margins, that now screamed their meaning, the taste of poison in the stream, strange sicknesses born from greed. The pieces were beginning to connect, forming a mosaic of chilling intent. The next morning, Johari made his decision. He would follow Keto's pride. Their choice of new territory, unusually close to his compound, was not merely a matter of convenience. It was guidance. They were leading him to the source. He packed minimal supplies, took his old rifle, a necessary precaution, and set off, tracking their paw prints across the dew-kissed earth. He followed the pride's trail for hours, leading him to a remote, rarely patrolled gorge known only to a few local Maasai. As he approached a stream the lions had drunk from, a stream that should have been clear, he saw it. The water shimmered with an iridescent sheen, an unnatural rainbow of oil and chemicals. Hiding amongst the thorny acacia, Johari observed. A clandestine operation. Men in unmarked uniforms, their faces obscured, moving with a chilling efficiency. They were dumping heavy barrels of industrial waste into a hidden ravine that fed directly into the stream. His blood ran cold. Then his eyes caught another detail, more terrifying still. Strange, sophisticated traps camouflaged near the dumping site. Not for killing, but for capturing animals without causing obvious external injury. Perhaps for biological samples, for unique parts, for nefarious research? The horrifying realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just illegal dumping, this was a major eco-crime, potentially linked to a powerful, shadowy corporation operating deep within the reserve. They were polluting the very lifeblood of the savannah, making the animals vulnerable to unnatural ailments, all for profit or some terrifying research agenda. Keto's precise wound, the unnatural infection, the toxic discoloration. It was all a direct result of encountering these unnatural dangers, made worse by exposure to this poisoned environment. The cracking of a twig underfoot, almost imperceptible, echoed like a gunshot in the tense silence of the gorge. "What are you doing here, Kamau?" A cold, guttural voice sliced through the air. Figures emerged from the deep shadows of the ravine, not the haphazard, opportunistic poachers he was used to, but well-equipped men in unmarked uniforms, moving with predatory precision. They carried sophisticated gear, their eyes hard, ruthless. This wasn't local crime. This was a powerful, organized entity. In that heart-stopping moment, Johari's mind flashed back to Dr. Adongo's calculated evasiveness, Minister Adongo's too-sharp gaze, the unsettling surveillance from the research team cameras. They were either compromised or, worse, complicit in this monstrous cover-up. The realization propelled him into action. "Hey," a voice barked. But Johari was already moving, a desperate blur of motion. He plunged into the dense bush, dodging thorny branches and weaving through thickets, leveraging every inch of his intimate knowledge of the terrain. The chase was on. He heard the distant, powerful roars of Keto's pride, not threatening him, but strategically echoing, bouncing off the escarpments, disorienting his pursuers, almost guiding him through the labyrinthine landscape. They were more than just patients. They were his silent allies. The pursuit was relentless. A flicker of movement ahead, a glint of metal, and Johari instinctively ducked, narrowly avoiding a tripwire, one of the metal teeth Mzee Omari had warned about. These weren't just traps for animals. They were for anyone who dared to get too close. He scrambled up a rocky outcrop, his lungs burning, the small fleck of biomarker, and the few shaky photos taken on his phone, his only damning evidence clutched tight in his hand. From his precarious vantage point, he could see them, Quito's pride, watching from a distance, their forms almost indistinguishable from the shadows. Quito looked directly at him, his amber eyes holding a silent, powerful acknowledgement. Johari understood then. The gratitude of the lions was far deeper than he had ever imagined. They were not just his patients, but his protectors, soldiers in a silent war against the encroaching darkness. He used a hidden animal trail, a secret passage known only to a handful of local trackers and the creatures of the bush, to outmaneuver his pursuers. Finally, he reached the edge of the official research zone, collapsing, physically and emotionally drained but alive. He made contact with Mzee Kipchoge, relaying the horrific truth in hushed, urgent tones. The elder listened, his deeply lined face grim, his wisdom now tinged with sorrow. "The shadow grows long, Johari," Mzee Kipchoge murmured, "but the light of truth, it burns brighter." Johari knew his life had irreversibly changed. He was no longer merely a healer. He was a witness, a whistleblower, a guardian. He owed it to Quito, to the pride, to his grandfather's legacy, and to the very soul of the savannah. Silhouetted against the rising sun, Johari looked out at the vast awakening savannah. Quito's roar echoed in the distance, no longer a cry for help, but a call to arms. His journey had just begun, a profound and perilous fight to expose the corporate cover-up threatening his adopted family and the ancient wisdom of the wild. End. Words, 799. Conclusion, Johari Kamau stood, the dust settling around him, the echoes of Quito's roar a primal symphony in his ears. He remembered that first dawn, the air stolen from his lungs as he stepped out of his hut to face the impossible. 53 lions surrounding his compound, their amber eyes fixed on him with an intensity that had pricked his skin with fear and awe. Just 20 feet away lay Quito, the injured male he had treated yesterday, his very presence an enigma that had drawn the entire pride to Johari. He'd come from the concrete jungle of Nairobi, a veterinary assistant drawn to the wild, but nothing in his 12 years as a conservationist could have prepared him for the unprecedented trust that had been offered, or the insidious darkness it had unveiled. The vigil had begun as a profound mystery, a test of faith and courage. It had ended as an undeniable pact, a silent alliance forged between man and beast against a common human enemy. Johari had healed Quito, but the lion in return had healed his perception, showing him where the true sickness lay. His life was forever changed. The whispers of the wild had become a roar for justice, and Johari, no longer just a healer, now carried the heavy burden of a whistleblower. The fight was far from over, but he would not face it alone. The savannah had chosen its champion.